attack is surgical and brutal. A 12-pound iron ball tears through the midsection of the merchant ship, turning the seasoned timber of the hull into a storm of jagged wooden shrapnel. In the blinding spray of salt and splintered oak, the youngest brother Ilyas is struck. He falls instantly, his life extinguished before he can even draw his sword or utter a final prayer. On the horizon, the black-sailed galleys of the Knights Hospitaller close in like sharks scenting blood in the surf. These are the warrior monks of St. John, the most elite naval killers of the 16th century. To these crusader elites, there is no such thing as a civilian merchant. There is only the infidel and the prize. They board with the cold, practiced efficiency of butchers, their steel breastplates gleaming with a terrifying holy indifference. Orus, the eldest brother, fights with the raw animal desperation of a man who has just seen his youngest siblings slaughtered. But he is overwhelmed by the sheer weight of armored men. He is not granted the mercy of a quick death. The knights have a far more profitable fate for a man of his strength. They throw him into the dark, feces-stained hull of their galley. For the next 3 years, the man who would one day be feared as Barbarossa would exist as a galley slave. He would spend his days chained to a wooden bench, rowing until his palms bled and his spirit frayed, watching the holy knights dine on fine wine and meat on the deck above, while he starved on a handful of mouldy hardtack and vinegar. It was in those chains, amidst the rhythm of the whip and the groaning of the oars, that the merchant died and a monster was born. But to truly understand why the name Barbarossa would eventually make the kings of Europe tremble in their beds, we have to look back at the world that created these brothers. The story of the Mediterranean's greatest admiral doesn't begin in a marble palace, but in a humble pottery workshop on the island of Lesbos. Their father, Yakup, was a retired Ottoman cavalryman, a sipahi, who had settled on the island and married a local Greek woman named Katerina. Together they raised 4 sons, Ishak, Orus, Hizir, and Ilyas. They were the ultimate middlemen of a shifting world. Fluent in Greek, Turkish, Arabic, and Italian, they were the bridge between the East and the West. They were merchant sailors, trading pottery, oil, and silk in a world where the sea was a lawless frontier. But the Mediterranean of the 15th century was a religious meat grinder. While Western history books often paint the Crusades as a series of land battles in the dusty streets of Jerusalem, the real ongoing crusade was happening on the waves. The Christian powers, Spain, Venice, and the Knights, operated a state-sponsored system of piracy they called privateering. To them, any Muslim-owned vessel was a target for holy theft. This environment of constant maritime predation forced the brothers to become as much warriors as they were sailors. They learned to navigate not just by the stars, but by the movement of enemy sails on the horizon. They learned the secret inlets of the North African coast and the treacherous currents of the Italian shoreline. When Orus finally escaped his captors, legend says he leapt into the churning sea during a midnight storm off the coast of Italy and swam for miles until his lungs nearly burst. He did not return to the pottery wheel. He found his brother Hizir, the man we would later know as Hayreddin. They stood together on the scorched shores of North Africa and made a blood pact that would change the map of the world. The Mediterranean would no longer be a playground for European kings. It would belong to them. The brothers moved their operations to Tunis, striking a tactical deal with the local sultan. We provide the protection and the terror. You provide the harbor and the silence. They began picking off Spanish and Italian galleons one by one, not just for gold, but for vengeance. They were no longer merchants, they were corsairs, privateers of the Sultan. Orus was a man possessed in battle. During the brutal siege of Bougie against the Spanish, an arquebus bullet shattered his left arm. The bone was pulverized into white dust. Without anesthesia, without a drop of wine to dull the pain, Orus watched with a terrifyingly calm gaze as his arm was sawn off by a ship surgeon. He did not retire to a life of quiet disability. He had a silver prosthetic arm forged, a gleaming limb of metal that became his trademark. This was the dignity of the Corsair. While European admirals were hiding behind high stone walls and delegating the dying to the poor, Orus was the first man over the rail of an enemy ship, smashing skulls with a silver fist and a scimitar. It was during these years of fire and blood that the Italians began to whisper the name Barbarossa, Redbeard, as a warning to any sailor brave enough to leave port. By 1516, the brothers had achieved the impossible. They had captured the city of Algiers and declared it a sovereign state. This was a direct public humiliation of Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor and the most powerful man in Europe. Charles V owned the gold of the New World, the vast armies of Germany, and the legendary navies of Spain. Yet he could not stop two brothers from a pottery island. The reason for their success was a fundamental civilizational contrast that the West still struggles to admit. The Spanish were arrogant, slow, and technologically stagnant. They relied on galleons, massive floating fortresses that were top-heavy and entirely dependent on the wind. If the wind died, a Spanish galleon was nothing more than a very expensive sitting duck. The Ottoman genius, perfected by the Barbarossas, lay in the galleon. These ships were sleek, low to the water, and powered by both sails and 30 to 40 oars. They didn't care about the wind. They could row into a dead calm, maneuver behind a Spanish galleon where its heavy cannons couldn't reach, and board it like a swarm of hornets. Furthermore, while the Spanish nobility viewed naval command as a birthright for the wealthy and the well-born, the Barbarossas operated a true meritocracy. They didn't care if a man was a former slave, a Greek convert, or a North African orphan. If he could sail, he was an officer. This was a machine built on raw skill and shared profit, while Europe's navy was a rigid hierarchy built on titles and unearned ego. In 1518, the elder brother Orus, the Silver Arm, was finally cornered. He was killed in a desperate rearguard action against the Spanish, fighting 20 men at once to buy his crew time to escape. The courts of Europe erupted in celebration. They believed the Redbeard threat was buried in the sand. They were wrong. The younger brother, Hizir, was the true strategic mastermind. He realized that for Algiers to survive, it couldn't remain a pirate nest. It needed to become a superpower. He sent a bold message to Suleiman the Magnificent in Constantinople. "Give me the protection of the Caliphate, and I will give you the Mediterranean." Suleiman, a man who recognized genius when he saw it, did not just accept the offer. He renamed Hizir Hayreddin, meaning the best of the faith, and invited him to the capital. In a ceremony that left the Ottoman viziers fuming with jealousy, the Sultan bypassed every noble-born admiral and appointed this former galley slave as the captain-in-chief, the Grand Admiral of the entire Ottoman navy. Hayreddin's first task was to modernize the Ottoman shipyards. He didn't just build ships, he built an industrial machine. He centralized the production of oars, sails, and cannons, ensuring that the Ottoman fleet was the most standardized and technologically advanced force in the world. He understood that naval power was as much about logistics as it was about bravery. The climax of this saga came in 1538 at the Battle of Preveza. The Pope, Spain and Venice had formed a holy league to wipe Barbarossa off the face of the earth once and for all. They assembled a terrifying force, 300 ships and 60,000 men led by Andrea Doria, the most decorated admiral in Christendom. Barbarossa had only 122 ships. On paper, it was a slaughter, but Barbarossa understood the science of the sea better than any man alive. He lured the heavy European fleet into shallow, narrow waters where their size became a liability. He watched the weather patterns with the eyes of a hawk. When the wind dropped, the massive Spanish galleons were paralyzed. Barbarossa gave the singular order, row. The Ottoman galleys surged forward with a precision the Europeans couldn't comprehend. Using Greek fire and tactical flanking, they incinerated the Spanish flagships. Andrea Doria was so psychologically broken by Barbarossa's maneuverability that he ordered a full retreat under the cover of darkness. By dawn, the Holy League was a shattered wreck of smoke and wood. For the next 30 years, the Mediterranean was an Ottoman lake. Not a single Christian ship could sail from Italy to Africa without paying tribute to the Sultan's shadow. But Hayreddin was more than just a warrior. He was a diplomat who navigated the complex politics of the Ottoman court and the shifting alliances of Europe. He formed an alliance with France against the Habsburgs, a move that shocked the Christian world but secured Ottoman interests for decades. He was a man who understood that power was a multifaceted tool to be used with both the sword and the pen. Western history still clings to the label of pirate for Hayreddin Barbarossa. They used the word to strip him of his dignity, because he was the man who humbled their empires. If he were English, he would be Sir Francis Drake. If he were French, he would be a saint of the sea. But because he fought for the Sultan, the West tries to hide his true legacy. They don't tell you that Barbarossa used his vast fleet to rescue thousands of Moriscos, the Muslims and Jews who were being systematically tortured and murdered by the Spanish Inquisition, bringing them to the safety and religious freedom of North Africa. He transported them in his own ships, ensuring they had the resources to rebuild their lives in a land that respected their dignity. They don't tell you that he established the most advanced naval hospitals and shipyards of the era. They don't tell you that while European sailors were being kidnapped and forced into service, the men of Barbarossa's fleet were free professionals who shared in the spoils of victory. Barbarossa died in 1546 in his palace in Istanbul. He didn't die in a gutter or a boarding action. He died in peace, a statesman and a scholar of the sea. But his spirit never truly left the water. Even today, when Turkish naval vessels leave the harbor of Istanbul, they lower their sails and fire a thunderous salute as they pass his green-domed mausoleum. They know what the West tries to forget, that the sea is, and always will be, the home of Barbarossa. The story of the Redbeard is more than just a tale of cannons and gold. It is the story of how a man in chains used those very chains to bind the empires that tried to break him. He showed the arrogant powers of Europe that a potter's son with a red beard and a silver arm could not only survive their holy war, but could rewrite the rules of civilization itself. He reminded the world that true power is not inherited. It is forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by the wisdom of experience. His legacy lives on in every ship that braves the Mediterranean, a testament to the man who became the Sultan's shadow and the master of the sea.